Hi, friends. Welcome back to Sunday Stories. I'm Megan. Hey, if you guys are enjoying this, share it with a friend and follow Ablaze Families on YouTube so that you'll get these every single week and you don't have to come looking for them. Okay. Also, moms and dads, if you're enjoying this, I have other podcasts. We have one called His Beloved Catholic Podcast for adults. And then we have one called Girls Arise, a podcast for Catholic girls. And we'd love to see you guys over there too. All right, guys. So today is Divine Mercy Sunday. Do you know what Divine Mercy Sunday is? Usually we put a lot of emphasis on Easter, and not everybody celebrates Divine Mercy, but it's a really, really cool holiday. It's something that John Paul II instituted because he had such a great love for St. Faustina. Do you know her story? St. Faustina was one of the saints that I first fell in love with when I became Catholic. And she was a Polish nun who had visits by Jesus. She knew Jesus really well, and he spoke to her all the time. He started speaking to her when she was just a young girl and called her to become a sister. And then he would visit her. And what he would talk about with her is his great love and his great mercy. Do you know what mercy means? Mercy means forgiveness. It means grace. And so, last week we talked about how Jesus flung open the gates of heaven, that he defeated sin and death, that he allowed us to be forgiven of our sins for the first time in human history. And so today we get to celebrate, what does that mean to be able to be forgiven of our sins, to have mercy? And so it's Divine Mercy Sunday. And what Jesus would say to St. Faustina is, I have oceans of mercy. Like I have so much mercy, it could fill an entire ocean, but nobody asks me for forgiveness. He said, I'm just waiting to pour my mercy out on people that don't even ask for it. Now we know it's not that no one asks, because lots of people ask, but he wants to provide this mercy to every single person in the world. And so he asked her to create an image, the Divine Mercy image, and it was of himself with a red light, a ray of white and blue and red coming from him. And what that was meant to signify was that moment when Jesus was on the cross and St. Longinus stabbed him in the side with a spear. And in that moment, blood and water flowed from the side of Jesus. And that blood and water is his mercy. It even says in the story of St. Longinus that it dripped into his eye, and he had been blind for many years, and it healed him in that moment. Isn't that cool? Go back and read his story. I'll tell you that again. It's fantastic. So we're celebrating that today. And he also gave her a prayer that he wanted to be prayed, and it was called the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And so today, on this feast day, you should pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and you should venerate an image of Divine Mercy. And if you do, you get an indulgence, which is pretty cool. And also, this goes along with our Sunday gospel. So our Sunday gospel for today is the one that we call the Doubting Thomas. Poor Thomas. For the rest of history, he'll be called Doubting Thomas. Always breaks my heart a little bit for him because he was so much more than just a doubter. He was a very, very powerful evangelizer and apostle as well. Okay, so let's go back. All right, so where we left off last week was in the garden, right? We're in the garden with Mary and Jesus. And now remember, Peter and John had left, and so they didn't actually see Jesus in that moment. They had not seen the resurrected Jesus yet. And I don't know how long it takes for this to happen. I doubt it was a week later, maybe a day later, who knows? But Jesus appears to the disciples in the upper room. It says all the doors were locked, and he all of a sudden was in their midst. Isn't that cool? Can't you imagine Jesus just like going through walls? And so he comes into where they are, and he shows himself to them. Oh, can you imagine? Can you imagine what they must have felt? Number one, joy, excitement, maybe a little bit of fear, maybe a little bit of shame. Like, I wasn't there for you, Jesus. I ran. Imagine what Peter must have felt. And so, but there was one apostle that wasn't there, and that was Thomas, St. Thomas. He wasn't there that day. And so when he comes back to the upper room after Jesus is already gone, they tell him this story. You will not believe what just happened. Jesus was here. We saw him. He's alive. And he's like, no, I'm not so sure about that. Like, I saw what they did to Jesus. Everybody saw what they did to Jesus. There's no way he could be alive. And the funny thing is, Jesus kept telling them over and over that he was going to rise again. But Thomas needed to see it. He said, until I see it with my own eyes, until I see the scars in his hands, till I touch the wounds, I won't believe that Jesus has risen from the dead. And so, just as he requested, Jesus came back to the upper room again when Thomas was there. And he comes into the room and he comes up to Thomas. Oh, my favorite thing about all these stories is always thinking about what his face would have looked like. The look in his eyes, the way he would have spoken to people. Did he walk up to Thomas and go, come on, Thomas, why didn't you believe? How do you not know? He walked up to him with compassion. And he's like, Thomas, I'm right here. I've risen. And then he takes the hand of Thomas and he pulls it against his own side and says, it's okay. You can touch the wounds, and puts Thomas's hand into his wounds. That's love. That's mercy. That's forgiveness. It's redemption. It's all the things. And I love Thomas's response. He says, my Lord and my God. He has no doubt in that moment. He knows 100% who he is speaking with, what he has done. And after that moment, Thomas goes off to spread the gospel around the world. He's not just a doubting Thomas. He did amazing things for Jesus after that. And I think it's okay to doubt like Thomas did, right? Sometimes we doubt, but sometimes it's the doubt that we then turn back to Jesus and let him answer those doubts. If you just doubt and you walk away from Jesus, then you're hurting yourself. But if you doubt and you go back to God and say, God, I don't get this. Help me to understand. He will give you exactly what you need, and your faith will be made so much stronger because of those doubts and because you gave them to God. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next weekend.